Most people don't realize their symptoms. Bloating after meals, stubborn fatigue, brain fog, sugar cravings, joint aches, even anxiety are often driven by one hidden problem: a leaky gut. When the gut lining becomes damaged, the tight junctions that are meant to keep your digestive contents contained begin to loosen. Undigested food particles, bacterial toxins, and inflammatory molecules leak directly into the bloodstream, overwhelming your immune system and triggering widespread inflammation. And because this happens quietly, people chase supplements, diets, and detoxes without ever addressing the actual upstream cause. In clinical practice, I've seen that repairing the gut lining is one of the fastest ways to reduce inflammation and restore energy. And while there are countless pills claiming to heal leaky gut, most are too weak, too synthetic, or fail to address what the gut truly needs to rebuild itself. The gut lining is living tissue. It needs nutrients it can actually use. Which brings us to the one food that consistently outperforms probiotics and most gut formulas. Not because it's trendy, but because it directly repairs the physical structure of the gut wall, seals the gaps, calms immune overreaction, and feeds the beneficial microbes that maintain long-term resilience. This food contains the exact amino acids, peptides, and bioactive compounds required to rebuild the mucosal barrier. It restores tight junction integrity, reduces endotox in leakage, and provides the raw materials for the immune system to stand down. And unlike probiotics, which often die in stomach acid, or supplements that only offer fragments of what the gut needs, this food delivers complete, natural, bioavailable nourishment in a form the body recognizes immediately. Patients report reduced bloating, calmer digestion, improved stool consistency, better energy, and reduced cravings within days. When you give the gut the building blocks it's been missing, the results can be remarkably fast. At its core, leaky gut is a structural breakdown of the gut lining at the cellular level. The small intestine is lined with a single layer of epithelial cells held together by tight junctions, microscopic protein gates designed to open and close with precision. Their role is to allow nutrients through while keeping out the harmful material that has no business entering the bloodstream. When the gut lining is healthy, this barrier behaves like a highly intelligent filter. But when damage occurs, these tight junctions loosen, the epithelial cells become stressed, and the once selective membrane becomes permeable. This means substances that should remain inside the gut, bacterial fragments, toxins, undigested proteins, acids, and inflammatory molecules, slip directly into circulation. Once these particles leak through, the immune system reacts immediately and aggressively. It recognizes them as foreign invaders and launches an inflammatory response that, in many people, never fully switches off. This is why leaky gut becomes a chronic drain on health. Instead of calming after a meal, the immune system stays busy dealing with the continual influx of irritants. It becomes exhausted, dysregulated, and overly reactive. Over time, this leads to everything from bloating and cramping to joint aches, chronic sinus issues, headaches, fatigue, and mood instability. The inflammation isn't random. It is the natural consequence of the immune system defending the body from what it perceives as a continuous attack. On top of this, the nerves lining the gut become irritated. When toxins and inflammatory compounds leak into the bloodstream, mast cells release histamine and other signaling chemicals, leading to flushing, itching, rashes, migraines, or intolerance to foods that were once well tolerated. Many people assume they suddenly developed allergies, when in reality, it is the leaking gut that has triggered immune overreaction to harmless substances. This is why one person may tolerate a food 1 week and react to it the next. The baseline inflammation keeps shifting depending on the degree of gut permeability. Digestive discomfort is also a direct downstream effect. When the gut lining is damaged, digestive enzymes are disrupted, stomach acid becomes inconsistent, and beneficial bacteria lose their habitat. The microbiome, the ecosystem of trillions of microbes that depend on a stable gut environment, begins to shift. Harmful bacteria flourish when the barrier is compromised, producing gases that cause bloating, cramps, and unpredictable bowel habits. The gut's motility slows or speeds up, leading to constipation or diarrhea. In some cases, both issues alternate as the gut struggles to regain balance. People often misinterpret these symptoms as simply having a sensitive stomach, when the root cause is that the physical barrier itself is damaged. Fatigue is one of the most profound effects. When toxins leak out of the gut, the liver is forced to work overtime. It attempts to neutralize the incoming load, but over time, the continual pressure drains metabolic energy. Mitochondria, the tiny powerhouses in every cell, are particularly sensitive to inflammatory stress. They slow down, leading to low energy, difficulty concentrating, brain fog, and a general sense of heaviness or sluggishness. Many patients describe feeling as though their body is running on flat batteries. This is not imagination. It is the metabolic cost of chronic low-grade inflammation. The connection between leaky gut and immune dysfunction is also significant. 70% of the immune system sits in the gut lining. When the barrier becomes compromised, the immune system is forced into continuous activation. This leads to weakened resilience against infections, slower recovery, and susceptibility to chronic conditions. The immune system begins to confuse harmless proteins with harmful ones, which is why autoimmune tendencies often appear or worsen when leaky gut is present. The body cannot differentiate clearly because the barrier that once organized and screened incoming material is no longer functioning properly. Dr. Myhill's clinical approach emphasizes that repairing the gut lining is the first and most essential step in restoring whole body health. Without sealing the barrier, no supplement, diet, probiotic, or lifestyle change can deliver its full benefit. The body is designed to heal, but it cannot do so while being constantly flooded by irritants from a damaged gut. When the tight junctions are restored, inflammation reduces, the immune system calms, the microbiome stabilizes, digestion improves, and mitochondrial energy production begins to climb back toward normal. Addressing leaky gut is not simply a digestive intervention. It is a foundational repair that influences nearly every organ system because so much of the body's stress originates from what leaks through when this barrier breaks down. The reason this particular food consistently outperforms probiotics, supplements, and even major dietary changes comes down to its biochemical design. It contains the precise raw materials the gut lining is built from, in the exact forms the body can immediately use. The gut wall is a fast turnover tissue. The cells renew every few days, but only when they are supplied with the correct amino acids, collagen, forming peptides, anti-inflammatory compounds, and microbiome supporting substrates. This food delivers all of these simultaneously, and in practice that makes it the most efficient way to seal a leaky gut. The first way it works is by directly strengthening tight junctions. These microscopic protein gates rely on amino acids such as glycine, glutamine, and proline, along with collagenous peptides that form the scaffolding of the gut membrane. Supplements may offer isolated forms of these nutrients, but the gut doesn't use isolated fragments as effectively as whole complexes. The peptides in this food arrive in biologically intact sequences that the gut lining immediately recognizes and incorporates into its repair processes. Glycine helps regulate the gating of tight junctions, preventing them from opening too widely. Glutamine fuels the enterocytes so they can regrow and seal gaps. Proline stabilizes collagen fibers, making the repaired lining stronger and more resilient. At the same time, this food brings down the inflammatory cytokines that keep the gut wall irritated. It naturally contains anti-inflammatory amino acids and compounds that reduce the production of TNF-alpha, IL-6, and other signaling molecules that perpetuate damage. When the immune system stops overreacting inside the gut wall, the epithelial cells can finally begin proper regeneration. This quieting of the immune response is one reason people often notice improvements in bloating, cramping, and food reactions within a few days. You are not just feeding the gut, you are calming the fire so healing can proceed. Another important aspect is its effect on the mucosal barrier, the protective gel-like layer that lines the intestines. Many people think only about the surface cells, but the mucus layer is just as critical. It is the first line of defense against toxins, bacteria, and digestive acids. This food contains mucus in building nutrients that support the production of a thicker, healthier mucosal layer. When this layer is restored, irritants are blocked before they can even reach the tight junctions. This gives the underlying tissue time to repair, reducing permeability far more effectively than supplements that target just one part of the barrier. Where this food becomes especially powerful is in how it affects the microbiome. Harmful bacteria feed on undigested carbohydrates and inflammatory debris. Beneficial bacteria, on the other hand, thrive when the gut is calm, the pH is stable, and the mucosal layer is intact. This food shifts that internal environment almost immediately. It starves the harmful strains by reducing the leakage of inflammatory molecules they feed on. At the same time, it feeds beneficial species through fermentation of certain peptides and amino acids that beneficial microbes convert into short-chain fatty acids. These short-chain fatty acids nourish the gut lining, regulate immune function, and help restore metabolic stability. Microbial diversity begins to return as harmful strains lose their advantage and beneficial strains regain territory. Diversity is not just a preference. It is a marker of gut stability and resistance to inflammation. Probiotics attempt to add bacteria from the outside, but they rarely survive stomach acid and often fail to colonize. This food, however, works internally by altering the conditions of the gut in a way that allows your own native microbes to regrow. The body prefers its own ecosystem. This food simply gives it what it needs to stabilize and flourish. Research consistently shows that whole food complexes outperform probiotics and powders because they provide structure, not fragments. Probiotics introduce a handful of species. This food supports the entire environment in which hundreds of species must coexist. Gut powders often contain synthetic or isolated ingredients, which lack the synergy necessary for true tissue repair. And general dietary changes, while helpful, take much longer because they only reduce irritation. They do not directly rebuild the lining. Dr. Myhill's approach is always to get upstream of the problem. A damaged gut lining must be fed with the materials it needs to repair its actual architecture. Nothing works faster because nothing else provides such complete, bioavailable, biologically matched building blocks. When you supply the food your gut wall is literally made of, healing becomes straightforward, predictable, and surprisingly rapid. When the gut lining begins to seal and permeability decreases, the effects ripple through nearly every system in the body. The improvements are not abstract. They're measurable shifts people feel in real time because the gut is directly connected to immune balance, hormone regulation, brain chemistry, mitochondrial energy, and metabolic stability. This is why so many symptoms that seem unrelated begin to lift once the gut barrier is restored. One of the first changes people notice is smoother digestion. When the gut lining is no longer irritated, digestive enzymes begin functioning properly again. The body can break down proteins, fats, and carbohydrates more efficiently, which reduces fermentation and gas production. Bloating often decreases within days because the rogue bacteria that feed on undigested food lose their fuel source. Motility stabilizes, meaning bowel movements become more predictable and comfortable. Constipation eases because inflammation is no longer slowing down peristalsis, and diarrhea settles as the gut stops flushing out irritants. The experience of "my stomach feels calmer" is simply the downstream effect of the immune system no longer being triggered every time food enters the digestive tract. Joint pain and body stiffness often improve next. When toxins and inflammatory molecules stop leaking through the gut wall, the immune system can finally dial down its inflammatory signaling. Cytokines such as IL-6 and TNF-alpha, major drivers of joint discomfort, drop as gut permeability decreases. Cartilage becomes less inflamed and mobility feels smoother. Many people describe waking up with less morning stiffness because systemic inflammation has reduced overnight. This is not magic. It is a direct result of lowering the inflammatory load the body has been carrying for years, often unknowingly. Immunity strengthens as well. 70% of the immune system sits along the gut wall, constantly sampling what passes through. When the gut is leaky, the immune system is forced into permanent activation, leaving it distracted, exhausted, and less able to respond effectively to real threats. With the barrier sealed, the immune system gets a break. It no longer misfires at harmless particles and can instead focus on true pathogens. People notice fewer colds, quicker recovery times, and a general feeling of resilience. The chronic under the weather heaviness that many dismiss as stress or aging often lifts once immune resources are no longer wasted on cleaning up gut-derived irritants. Brain clarity improves in parallel. Leaky gut produces inflammatory compounds and endotoxins that travel through the bloodstream and affect the brain. These molecules disrupt neurotransmitter production, irritate the vagus nerve, and interfere with mitochondrial energy inside neurons. When the gut heals and endotox, leakage decreases, brain inflammation lowers, allowing neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, and acetylcholine to rebalance. This is why clearer thinking, improved focus, and emotional stability are common. People describe it as the fog lifting, or my brain switching back on. The gut and brain communicate intensely. When the gut calms, the brain receives the message. Energy levels also rise because mitochondrial stress decreases. Chronic low-grade inflammation forces mitochondria to divert energy toward defense instead of production. When gut permeability improves and inflammation lowers, mitochondria can return to efficient ATP generation. The result is smoother, more sustained energy without the mid-afternoon crash. Blood sugar becomes more stable because inflammation interferes with insulin sensitivity. Reduce the inflammation at the gut level, and the metabolic system can regulate itself far more effectively. People often find they can go longer between meals without cravings or dips in concentration. Hormonal balance begins to shift as well. The gut influences hormone metabolism, detoxification, and signaling. A leaking gut places constant stress on the adrenal glands, pushing cortisol up and disrupting the normal rhythm of other hormones. When inflammation reduces, cortisol stabilizes and the hormonal system can reset. Women often notice more predictable cycles and less PMS. Men find improvements in morning energy and mood stability. Hormones respond negatively to inflammation and positively to repair, so the gut becomes a central regulator of overall endocrine balance. Blood sugar stability is another major improvement. Inflammation from leaky gut interferes with insulin receptor function, making the body less responsive to insulin. This leads to sugar spikes, energy crashes, and cravings. When the gut lining seals and inflammation drops, insulin sensitivity improves. The body can regulate glucose more effectively, reducing cravings for sugar and processed carbohydrates. This contributes to more stable energy, fewer mood swings, and easier weight management. Sleep quality improves as gut-derived inflammation quiets down. The body is better able to shift into parasympathetic mode when the immune system is not constantly activated. Melatonin production becomes more consistent because it is closely linked with gut-derived serotonin. People fall asleep faster and wake up feeling more rested, not because they changed their sleep habits, but because their internal stress load has decreased. Each of these improvements stems from one physiological shift, reducing the toxic and inflammatory load entering the bloodstream from a damaged gut wall. When the barrier heals, systems that were previously overburdened can finally function as they were designed to. The gut may seem like just one part of the body, but in reality, it is the central control point for inflammation, immunity, energy, hormones, and mental clarity. Healing it produces whole body change because nearly every system depends on the integrity of that barrier. Start each day with a warm, easy-to-digest serving of this food to give the gut immediate access to the building blocks it needs, aiming for 1 cup 240-300 ml first thing on an empty or near-empty stomach within 30-60 minutes of waking so the peptides and amino acids encounter the mucosa, without competing with a heavy meal. If you tolerate morning intake poorly, shift to mid-morning between meals, but avoid taking it immediately after a large carbohydrate-rich breakfast because rapid glucose-driven insulin responses can divert resources away from repair. For maximum effect, use it twice daily for the first 7-14 days, once in the morning and once in the evening before bed, then reduce to once daily as maintenance. Consistency matters more than quantity. Daily micro doses are preferable to large, infrequent boluses because the epithelial cells turn over rapidly and benefit from continual supply of substrates. Preparation matters. Homemade simmered broth from high-quality bones with a splash of acid, such as apple cider vinegar, extracts collagen and minerals more effectively than quick commercial broths. Simmer for at least 6-12 hours for poultry bones and 12-24 hours for beef or ox bones to release gelatinous collagen and glycine-rich peptides. If using a powdered collagen product, choose an undenatured, hydrolyzed collagen from grass-fed, pasture-raised sources with minimal additives and dissolve it in warm, not boiling, liquid to preserve peptide integrity. Avoid instantizing powders with sugar, flavorings, or excessive heat, which can denature useful compounds. Store-bought broths can be used, but read labels carefully. Avoid those with added industrial seed oils, excess salt, MSG-like additives, or flavor enhancers that irritate the gut. Timing with other nutrients improves absorption and healing. Vitamin C supports collagen synthesis, so pairing the broth with a small source of vitamin C, such as a few slices of citrus, a handful of berries, or a tablespoon of fermented vegetable juice, after the broth can enhance incorporation of the peptides into new tissue. Avoid taking the broth alongside high-dose iron or zinc supplements, which can provoke transient oxidative stress. Space mineral supplements 2 hours apart where possible. Short periods of gentle fasting around the time you take the broth can enhance autophagy and cellular repair, but prolonged fasting without clinician oversight is not recommended for everyone. Supportive habits amplify the benefit. Reduce exposure to gut irritants. Stop or dramatically cut back on processed seed oils, excessive alcohol, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, and high-dose NSAIDs which prevent mucosal healing. Prioritize sleep hygiene and stress reduction techniques such as 10-20 minutes of vagal, stimulating breathing after the broth. Parasympathetic tone supports digestion, reduces mast cell activation, and allows repair processes to progress. Chew slowly and avoid rushing meals so gastric acid and digestive enzymes function optimally. Poor chewing increases the burden on the small intestine and undermines the repair work you are doing with the broth. Best combinations include pairing the broth with easily digested protein and non-starchy vegetables while avoiding high FODMAP loads during the initial repair phase if you are sensitive to fermentable carbohydrates. Fermented foods can be reintroduced gradually once the mucosal layer is thicker. Start with small amounts of plain kefir, sauerkraut brine, or yogurt to encourage microbial diversity without overwhelming the system. Use low-dose targeted probiotics only after several days of consistent broth therapy if you need to reseed specific strains, because they will colonize more successfully in a calmer, repaired environment. Common mistakes: slow healing. Don't assume all broths are equal. Cheap, factory-made broths often lack gelatin and contain additives that perpetuate inflammation. Don't over-rely on collagen powders and ignore food matrix effects. Powders can help but are not a perfect substitute for slow-simmered broth. Don't throw in raw cruciferous vegetables or large amounts of raw onion and garlic in the early days if you have marked sensitivity, because these can provoke gas and delay perceived improvement. Avoid immediately restarting foods that provoked reactions before the repair phase. Rechallenge methodically after 2 to 4 weeks of consistent repair. Finally, don't ignore other drivers of permeability: active infections, dental issues, high sugar intake, and chronic stress will sabotage the gains from the broth unless they are addressed concurrently. Make it part of a simple routine by preparing a batch twice weekly and keeping single. Serve portions in the fridge or freezer, warming a cup each morning and evening. Keep a short symptom log for the first 14 days. Note bloating, stool consistency, energy, and sleep, so you can see measurable change and adjust timing or dose accordingly. Combine this habit with reduced inflammatory exposures, improved sleep, and gentle stress management, and you create an environment where the gut lining can rebuild quickly and sustainably. Gluten can be a major provoker of gut permeability in susceptible individuals because certain gluten peptides resist full digestion and interact directly with the epithelial lining, stimulating zonulin release, which opens tight junctions and increases paracellular leak so that larger molecules cross into the bloodstream and trigger immune activation and inflammation. Refined sugar feeds opportunistic and pro-inflammatory microbes, which flourish on simple carbohydrates, leading to dysbiosis that produces metabolites and gases that irritate the mucosa while also promoting systemic insulation. Spikes that increase oxidative stress and impair the cellular machinery responsible for mucosal repair. Highly processed foods are a double hit. They lack the intact protein, fat, mineral matrix the gut needs for reconstruction, while containing additives, emulsifiers, and thickeners that disturb mucus structure, strip away protective glycoproteins, and alter bacterial behavior, effectively thinning the mucosal layer and making the epithelial surface more vulnerable to damage. Industrial seed oils, high in omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acids, oxidize readily and generate lipid peroxides that damage cell membranes, provoke inflammatory eicosanoid cascades, and impair mitochondrial function in enterocytes, so that the energy dependent processes which maintain tight junction integrity become compromised. Alcohol is directly cytotoxic to the mucosa in dose-dependent fashion. It increases permeability by disrupting epithelial cell membranes, reducing mucus production, promoting overgrowth of opportunistic bacteria, and elevating circulating endotox in levels which drive systemic inflammation and hepatic stress. Overeating and constant grazing change the luminal environment by increasing bile acid load, altering pH, and promoting small intestinal bacterial overgrowth in susceptible individuals, while mechanical and chemical overload suppress efficient digestion and keep the immune system engaged with partially digested material rather than allowing repair cycles. Frequent snacking prevents the fasting windows that support autophagy and epithelial cell renewal, and it keeps digestive enzymes and bile continuously active, which can irritate a fragile mucosa and deprive enterocytes of the periodic rest they need to rebuild tight junctions effectively. Chronic stress elevates cortisol and sympathetic tone, which reduce blood flow to the gut, impair mucus secretion, and shift immune balance toward pro-inflammatory states, while stress-induced changes to motility and secretions encourage dysbiosis and reduce the resilience of the mucosal barrier. Sleep amplifies systemic inflammation and weakens circadian regulation of digestive enzyme release and mucosal repair pathways, impairing the nighttime restorative processes that consolidate epithelial healing and regulate immune surveillance within the gut. Associated lymphoid tissue, nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory drugs commonly damage the gastric and small intestinal mucosa by inhibiting prostaglandin in synthesis, which is essential for mucosal blood flow and protective mucus production, resulting in increased permeability and microscopic bleeding that delay or prevent adequate repair. Proton pump inhibitors and other acid-suppressing medications change gastric pH, which reduces the first-line barrier to microbes and favors small intestinal colonization by oropharyngeal and environmental organisms, producing dysbiosis and increased antigenic load downstream antibiotics, while sometimes necessary, indiscriminately reduce microbial diversity and remove keystone species that produce short-chain fatty acids and other metabolites crucial for epithelial nutrition and immune regulation, leaving the mucosa deprived of bacterial, derived signaling molecules that promote tight junction stability. Frequent use of antiseptic mouthwashes and overzealous hygiene practices can also alter oral and gut microbial seeding, reducing the early life and ongoing exposures that help establish a balanced microbiome and inadvertently favor resistant inflammatory strains. High dose omega-6 supplements, isolated iron in excess, and certain food additives like carrageenan have all been shown to provoke mucosal irritation or alter microbial composition in ways that hinder healing by increasing oxidative stress or providing substrates for harmful microbes. Heavy consumption of raw cruciferous vegetables and large amounts of raw fermentable fibers in the early repair phase can provoke gas and mechanical irritation in a hypersensitive gut, delaying subjective improvement and sometimes leading people to abandon a useful repair strategy. Prematurely repeated exposure to food antigens that previously provoked reactions without doing a structured elimination and reintroduction approach perpetuates immune activation and keeps the gut wall from closing, so methodical rechallenge after a period of repair is necessary for long-term tolerance to return lifestyle contributors such as sedentary behavior, continued exposure to environmental toxins, untreated dental infections, and chronic high blood sugar further compound the problem by sustaining low-grade inflammation, encouraging pathogenic microbial overgrowth, and increasing the metabolic burden on the liver and immune system, which together block the progress of mucosal restoration. Begin the first day by taking a warm cup of the gut repair food on an empty stomach within an hour of waking, allowing the amino acids and peptides to coat the mucosa and start the repair process. Drink a glass of water immediately afterward to support cellular hydration and help flush inflammatory molecules from circulation. Breakfast should be light and easily digestible, such as soft, cooked eggs, lightly steamed vegetables, or a small portion of soaked oats to avoid overwhelming the digestive system while repair begins. Focus on slow chewing and mindful eating to ensure optimal enzyme activation. Midday, maintain hydration with plain water or herbal teas and include a small, balanced lunch rich in non-starchy vegetables, moderate protein, and healthy fats to provide additional nutrients for repair without provoking microbial fermentation or bloating. If tolerated, a second serving of the gut repair food can be taken mid-morning or mid-afternoon to supply continuous substrates for epithelial renewal, particularly during the initial 3 days when tight junctions are most vulnerable. By day 2 or 3, patients often report reduced bloating and less post-meal discomfort because early sealing of the tight junctions reduces antigen leakage and immune activation. Continue morning and optional afternoon servings, keeping portion moderate. Hydration remains crucial, lame for 5 to 2 liters of water daily, spaced evenly, to maintain mucosal moisture and support metabolic detoxification. Lunch and dinner should prioritize lightly cooked, anti-inflammatory foods such as zucchini, carrots, leafy greens, wild, caught fish or free-range poultry, while avoiding processed grains, refined sugar, seed oils, and alcohol. Short, gentle walks after meals can improve motility and support parasympathetic activation, which enhances digestive efficiency and mucosal blood flow. By day 4 to 5, the mucosal layer begins thickening and microbiome balance starts to shift. Morning intake continues, and if tolerated, a small evening serving before bed can further supply building blocks for overnight repair. Sleep becomes a central repair tool. Aim for 7-9 hours of uninterrupted rest, ideally in a dark, cool environment to synchronize circadian rhythms and optimize hormone regulation. Exposure to morning sunlight for 10-15 minutes helps maintain vitamin D levels, which modulate immune function and gut barrier integrity. Avoid late night snacking or stimulants that interfere with repair cycles. By days 6 to 7, tight junction integrity improves significantly and inflammation markers drop. Energy levels often rise, cognitive clarity improves, and bowel movements become more consistent. Continue morning and optional evening servings as above. Introduce small amounts of microbiome, supporting fermented foods. Plain kefir, sauerkraut brine, or miso in tiny quantities to gently reseed beneficial bacteria without overwhelming the gut. Hydration and supportive meals remain consistent, and moderate movement such as walking, yoga, or stretching enhances circulation and parasympathetic tone. If continuing to day 10-14, the gut lining stabilizes and the mucosal barrier is noticeably thicker. Morning servings of the gut repair food may suffice alone, with evening servings optional depending on individual tolerance and symptom tracking. Lunch and dinner should continue to emphasize anti-inflammatory, nutrient-dense foods rich in vitamins, minerals, and fiber that feed the beneficial microbes. Maintain hydration and avoid chronic stress. Incorporate 10-20 minutes of vagal, breathing or meditation daily to support immune modulation and epithelial repair. By the second week, most patients notice measurable reductions in bloating, gas, food sensitivities, cravings, and fatigue, alongside improved sleep, more stable mood and energy throughout the day. Gentle exercise and sun exposure continue to reinforce circadian and metabolic health. Throughout the 7-14-day blueprint, progress is incremental but cumulative. Early days focus on establishing the repair substrate, stabilizing tight junctions, and reducing acute inflammation. Midweek brings noticeable symptom relief as the mucosa thickens and microbiome shifts toward a more diverse, beneficial population. By the end of the second week, patients often experience sustained improvement in digestion, energy, cognitive clarity, immunity, and hormonal balance. Keeping a simple log of symptoms, bloating, stool consistency, energy levels, mood, and sleep, helps track the repair trajectory and highlights the efficacy of the daily routine. The key to success is consistent use of the gut repair food, supportive meals, hydration, gentle movement, sleep optimization, and stress reduction, creating an environment where the gut can rebuild efficiently and the body can benefit systemically from a fully functioning, sealed, and resilient intestinal lining.